ուսում սկսել հայերենով, որովհետև կուզեի խորին երախտագիտություն հայտնել Matenadaranին այս հնարավորության համար։ Ես շատ ուրախ եմ այստեղ լինել Հայաստանում եւ շատ եմ սիրում Հայաստանը եւ հայերեն, եւ Անգլիայում եւ Ամերիկայում ես երբեք չեմ կարող հայերեն խոսել, դրա համար ես շատ ուրախ եմ այստեղ լինել։ Եվ նաեւ ես շատ շնորհակալ եմ իմ հարգելի պրոֆեսորին, դոկտոր Վանլինդ, ով միշտ հոգատար եւ աջակցող է եղել ինձ հետ։ Շատ շնորհակալ եմ։ My presentation for you today will be a play on the parallels between my dissertation work at Oxford and how it relates to a progressive movement of increased awareness of the Armenian community and improving Armenian studies at Oxford. I will start by giving you a little background on how I got into Armenian studies, then move into my research, and finally look at my own perspective on the current obstacles and implications of such research objectives. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to teach you the power of ancient Armenian medicine by teaching you some hidden remedies that relate to healing the now. Let's figure this out. Okay, so 3 years ago was my first ever exposure to the Armenian language and culture. I had never even heard about Armenia before. However, the Milikian Center's Critical Language Institute at Arizona State University unexpectedly called me and asked if I'd like to join the Armenian summer class. It was thanks to Gohar Harutyunyan, who works at Yerevan State University in the sociolinguistics department, and her excellent teaching skills that I fell in love with Armenian from day one. We were already starting to speak in various sentences and learn the alphabet, and it was a lovely time. After that experience, I realized I really wanted to teach Armenian myself, and so I tried to find a way to certify myself, and I looked into master's degrees and found Oxford. So I started at Oxford with a master's degree focused on translation of Armenian medical texts under the guidance of Dr. Vanlint. We worked on 13th to 15th century. I learned Grapar, Mijin Hayeren, and learned to effectively evaluate and translate these medical texts. Then we're moving on to the PhD in the history of Armenian medicine, and we're going to be doing increasingly difficult work. So, I should note that my background is actually at ASU, Arizona State University. I took multiple doctorate level classes as I was studying for a PhD in the history of Chinese medicine. So I touched on medical anthropology, plant biology, philology, and historical sciences. I studied and wrote papers attempting to break down the concept of traditional Chinese medicine and reanalyze its multi-ethnic upbringing using canonical and non-canonical medical texts to prove the impact of Greek, Persian, Arabic, Uyghur, Dai, Tibetan, and other medical systems on Chinese medicine. I have taken this experience and I'm using it as part of a way to analyze Armenian medicine, which I'll talk about right now. Okay. All right, so I'm going to briefly discuss my work. As much as it pains me to simplify it, since it's very difficult, I'm just going to briefly touch on it. So, looking at lost identity, the very first Armenian medical pharmacopoeia, or Bajishkaran, is written in the 10th century, quite late, even though Armenia is an ancient country and culture. 10th century is already amidst Greek, Arab, and Persian medical systems. In Armenia's very first medical text, Armenians venerate and praise the Greco-Arab medical system, but downplay their own work, to be humble, of course, in the eyes of the Lord, and exonerate the modern medicine of the time, which is nice and very fair, but we have seldom overtly stated Armenian medical ideas and remedies. Basically, when we finally have the opportunity to write down Armenian medicine, it comes at a time when there's a vast assimilation under other medical systems. Many remedies in the Armenian text can be highly adjacent, if not identical, to Greco-Arab remedies. This is why I posit that there is a lost identity issue in Armenian medicine that needs to be addressed to fully understand the ancient Armenian medical heritage. Moving on to hidden remedies. In order to revive Armenian identity, one must determine what constitutes Armenia's earliest remedies and how they were sustained or changed as they evolved through time. To do this, I am creating an ethnopharmacopoeia that is a data set tracking Armenia's earliest used plants and medical materials from what we might call the Armenian ethnogenesis, or looking at the ancient Armenian highlands as far back as we can, as we develop an Armenian identity, up until the 15th century, with Amir Vlad Amasiatsi's large and extensive compendium of Armenian medicine. This compendium is filled with much Greco-Arab medicine, but by tracking Armenian plant usage from the past to the 15th century, we can create a continuity or continuum data set that shows how Armenians used to use the plants, kept using it in the same way, or changed after Greek and Arab assimilation, or perhaps improved or lost the usage over time. Then we compare this continuity to nearby medical systems and their text to determine if an Armenian remedy has its own uniqueness among the layers of interspersed Greco-Arab medicine. This continuity can finally appropriately tie in Armenia's medical heritage to the text we have and revive Armenian identity, showing it's not a complete copy of Greco-Arab ideas. This will reveal the hidden Armenian remedies that are uniquely Armenian, or the remedies that express themselves in a more unique facet in comparison to the Greek and Arab tradition. So this very difficult work of extracting information from complex sources reminds me of a particular Armenian remedy preparation method. And that would be the decoction, or mapuch in the Arabicized Armenian. So this decoction is a method in which we have hard materials such as roots, bark, seeds, and we're able to extract the beneficial properties of the plants via this method, which in this particular recipe, which is from the Gagikitomian Pharmacopoeia, which I went to Venetic, because it's only housed in Venetic or Jerusalem. So in there, we see the recipe calls for 24 hours of steeping these plants into 1 liter of water, and then over that 24-hour period, afterwards we boil away half of it, and then we have the extract. So this particular extract is used with mint for heart palpitations, which we know in modern medicine, stimulating cold receptors, otherwise called gastric cooling, in the stomach, switches the body to a parasympathetic state, a calming state, which has proven to reduce heart rate and help with heart palpitations. Moving on to healing the now. What is this concept? Well, how do we heal after we have taken damage? First, we preserve our current state. We take action to improve our health, and then we become strengthened by the experience, taking into account the ups and downs. For my research, I look at preservation through the role of ethnobotany. So basically, this data set that I'm creating is hopefully going to present itself in a way that modern ethnobotanists can use to continue on their research using the Armenian perspective. However, something more important for me is I plan to use this data set to go around to Armenian villages and collect data on the modern usage of traditional medicine, what's currently happening in Armenia, as well as I'm working with a refugee from Artsakh who has an oral tradition passed down from generation to generation of the way they use the plants in Artsakh. So I'm hoping that we will be able to write down and finally document this potentially endangered heritage, as there might be not a chance to continue practicing in Artsakh these regional variants of medicine. Next, we have improve, the role of pharmacognosy, which pharmacognosy is a little bit different than pharmacology in that it's the study of the biochemical properties of plants or animal materials, whereas pharmacology looks at how that impacts like a human, basically the interaction, the physiology. So the data set that I am compiling is going to be presented in such a way that it will help modern researchers of medicine look at which particular plants we have remedies used for specific diseases. So for example, in 2015 we had a Chinese doctor, Professor Tu Youyou, who won a Nobel Prize looking at how over centuries in different Chinese medical manuscripts, they were able to see that mugwort, or Artemisia vulgaris, was the plant constantly used against malaria. So she dissected and looked at the biochemical components and realized that there was a particular one she called artemisinin, which was able to fight malaria. If we can do this with more diseases, perhaps such as diabetes, and we have multiple plants that are being used, we can denote which one we should spend more time on, which one modern researchers should look at and dissect. So that is one goal. And then another example from Armenian medicine. We look at Ekbalium elaterium, which this is Amirvat Amasiatsi's Angitats Pet, and at the bottom you can't really see it. It says Okte Palvami Uretsun, which is considered a malignant tumor. So Ekbalium elaterium has cucurbitacins, which are able to be used as an anti-cancerous medical component, or basically anti-tumoral. And this, in combination with barley, which the recipe calls for, which has phenolic acids, are able to combat cancer's proliferation. Okay, so next we have strengthen. Basically, I can only give my own perspective as someone new to the field, but I can see certain obstacles and opportunities arising from these obstacles. When I have entered Oxford and see Armenology as a field, I notice how much effort, and it's wonderful, the effort into biblical theory, into art history, and genocide, many important topics. But when it comes to medicine, there's a little bit of lacking material, which is understandable, but I'm hoping to fix this and bring more resources to Oxford's Bodleian Library. And so at the current moment, we have around 10 perhaps material on the history of medicine that are useful. I'm hoping that working with Donara Karapetyan at the Matenadaran, we can find resources that would be beneficial to Oxford, so that Armenologists in the future who wish to study medicine at Oxford will have better materials. Along with this opportunity, Dr. Van Lint and I have discussed our goal to bring together seminars and talks in which we can engage with various departments, the medical community, the plant science department, the history of medicine department, linguistics department. All of these departments can facilitate more awareness and increased focus on Armenian cultural studies and allow this conversation to spread out beyond just Armenological walls. My work wishes to integrate Armenian studies into the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, math, and foster dialogue with researchers so that more knowledge of STEM humanities compatibility and increased cohesion can allow researchers in either field to see potential in more crossovers and give Armenian studies access to a global stage of modern STEM humanities combined research. I hope and believe it may be possible to see increased funding to humanities perhaps if we have STEM involved. This might be an answer to certain funding issues.